All right, it's another week for the NFL playoffs, divisional round action happening, and it's everybody's. I don't know if it, Mark. When you take a look at you got the wild card weekend now, which has the most games, the most teams. The championship weekend and the Super Bowl, which is obvious, those are just, that's the biggest games. But the divisional rounds is I think the potential to be the most interesting, because this is when this is your opportunity to get to the Final Four. This is the opportunity to find out if a wild card team was a phony or not. Like, how for real, like, are the Dallas Cowboys or the New York Giants, teams like that, are they, or the Jacksonville Jaguars, are they just one-trick ponies? This is because there's also a good variety, number of games. Plus, as I said, now you also, with the seeding, now you get the top two seeds involved, which you didn't have last week. So I could see a reason why this could be a favorite for the fans during the playoffs.
For sure it is. It separates the wheat from the chaff. The thing I don't understand here, Greg, is why the National Football League chose to name or brand this the divisional round. What does divisional round have to do with the makeup of these games? Wild card, I understand. Okay.
Well, did it once?
I'm sorry?
Did it, like, when they only had like a certain number of teams long ago, did it once have to do with just divisional rounds? Or I don't know. I have no idea how long this logo this term has been used.
Well, it's been around since at least 1970.
Oh, okay.
And I don't quite understand the branding of it in that name. Every team comes from a division, so what makes this a divisional round? I don't get it, but it's the National Football League.
Yeah, nobody cares really. I guess if you're making a lot of money, but yeah, somebody probably came up with it. They thought it was as good as anything, and they stuck with it. So
I guess
sort of like the Buffalo Bills logo. I mean, can somebody please change that? I don't mind. I mean, I'm guessing that with all the changes to logos today in the NFL, they have to, and I'm not talking about the colors, because they've done a nice job changing the colors on the uniforms, but the actual Buffalo hasn't changed. And now I don't know if they had that thing. I don't know what it is, that line through it. Maybe they didn't have that. Maybe they did. But shouldn't, like, they have like a tougher buffalo or something, like a new age buffalo? It's just some old, ugly 1970s buffalo.
Looks like a bowling ball to me. If you had a bowling ball brand and it was called a Buffalo, that would be the perfect bowling ball, the Buffalo brand.
Yeah. I mean,
there's nothing footballish about it. No.
You would think it's with all the new logos, but I don't know. Maybe the fans like it. It's their team.
Yeah, it's that mafia, the Buffalo Mafia. They probably wig out if something changed. That's for sure.
Maybe. So, and look, they haven't won the Super Bowl yet, so maybe they need a change. That maybe that logo change will really do the trick. Who did it? I'm trying to remember who did well with that. Well, the Bengals. Didn't the Bengals go to the Super Bowl the first year after they changed their logo?
I'm not sure. I really don't recall.
I remember they had that ugly Bengals on their helmet, and then I'm pretty positive, like, the very next year they changed to what they have now. They went to the Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure, because I remember one team it happened to, but like even the Lions, I think, have changed their lion a little bit more meaner than in the old days. But it's not about the logos; it's about the teams and
it's about the players in the uniforms. And I got to say this: I think the best looking uniform are the Cincinnati Bengals' new white uniforms with the stripes along the sides.
Nice. Those are
pretty neat looking. Yes, they are.
And they take on the Bills. I can understand why San Francisco is getting like the better time on Sunday, because they're the West Coast team. But we all know the better game. It's the game of the week. It's Cincinnati and Buffalo. And I know there's we have a whole difference of opinion from your channel to our channel. I found out on your channel, the Playbook Experts channel, on your ATS show, that Jim Feist actually is going with the Bengals. I know I like the Bengals. I know you like the Bills. And this is, I don't know, this 5.5 number. I was quite surprised. Do you think that the main reason that the line will move to 5, and now it's 5.5, but has moved to 5 was because of the offensive line injuries to Cincinnati? Because I would have thought that this would have been a 3, especially after you can say what you want about how the Bengals won, but did anybody miss how the Bills won? I know some ugly win they had against Miami, so I don't think that mattered. I was kind of surprised it was 5.
Well, it actually opened up 4.5.
Okay.
And it moved to 5 upon Worthy injury. And then again, if the odds makers did a lot, well, we talked on our ATS show about Cincinnati and looked inside their stats, and they saw these horrific performances against other playoff teams. The experts, the sharps, see that stuff, and that's what they come barreling into the game with.
Okay.
So hence you've got a number that's growing because of that reason. Now, like Jim Feist likes the Cincinnati Bengals, there's a lot of people that also, like yourself, like the Cincinnati Bengals, and I respect that. I'm a big dog guy. You know that. I mean, 90% of what I do is underdogs, and Cincinnati is a really well-qualified underdog, unquestionably. Yeah. But I see holes. And that's,
sure.
So that, that's hence my reason. That's
it's sort of like reverting back to the holes of last year, which is the offensive line, especially more than anything. And without, it's looking like Jonah Williams and Alex Kappa may not play. They haven't been ruled out yet, but it's not looking good. The only good thing is that I guess the player Jackson Carman, who came in last week, apparently played well enough. So okay, well, that's fine. I think what happened in the Baltimore game, if I'm breaking down why they didn't play up to their standards, I think there's a few reasons why, but I just think, especially after what happened last year, they just might play better as the dog instead of the heavy. They were a heavy favorite last week against an in-division rival, and we all know why they were. But I just wonder about that. I wonder psychologically if that had something to do. Huntley's the quarterback. We're the favorite. Now they're the dog, and a lot of people with the line even going up. It's sort of like they're giving up on the Bengals again, like they gave up on them last year.
Well, Cincinnati's certainly been a good underdog, especially since Joe Burrow has been around. And not surprisingly, I mean, he wins football games, and if you dress him up as an underdog, it's probably along the way inside of those wins when he was an underdog. One of the things, another hurdle that I see that Cincinnati has to overcome, at least out of my database, is the fact that they were the defending Super Bowl losing team last year. And when those defending Super Bowl losing teams make it back to the playoffs the next year, they struggle mightily on the road. Which is the role, again, that they're having to dress up this particular week. But then again, what did they do last week, Greg? They won their game and didn't cover. Teams in the NFL playoffs that win a game and don't cover and come up as a dog the next week, they're really good. Okay,
really?
That's Cincinnati. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, this particular week. So you can make cases until the cows come home on both sides of this football game. But, I'm riding the holes in the statistical part of this football game.
I don't know what happened to Buffalo last week. I look at it again. I wonder how much still, because look, Hamlin's okay now, but I just wonder all of that distraction, what it's done to their concentration, their one-minded concentration of winning a Super Bowl. It disappeared completely. And then they had to kind of now they have to kind of get it back. I mean, because they really haven't yet. Even in that regular season game, they haven't yet looked crisp anywhere near the before that incident. And all it takes is one game. And I think I still believe that the winner of this game, unless it's an ugly game, the Bengals and the Bills play the way they did last week, and one team has to win. And then the Chiefs roll the Jags. You know what? I might change my mind and say, I just don't believe in the Bills and the Bengals anymore. And I'm probably just going to go with the Chiefs. But I need to see one of these two teams come out of this playing like we know they can play, playing like a true Super Bowl contender.
Well, the one side of that aspect is that they could leave the game on the field. If they go at this thing, balls to the wall, toe-to-toe, a 15-round knockout.
Could be, yeah.
Very, very difficult to get back up the very next week.
Especially if Kansas City wins in the third quarter.
Right. Exactly right. So, that could come into play here as well. So, depends upon how spent the winner of this football game ends up being going into that Kansas City game.
Yeah, and the Kansas City game, now it's 8.5, 350 on the money line. By the way, the Bengals money line is 215, and I think that's the best bargain if you're looking for a good payout this week, because they're obviously the best team getting points, getting 2-1. That's really where I was kind of surprised a little bit more, that if they were only a 3-point dog, they would only be whatever. They might only be like a plus 145 on a money line, which is kind of meaningless. But now that they're a 5.5-point dog, you're getting 2-1 on the money line, which is pretty good. But for the Jags, you're getting 350. That's the most, and that's not surprising. But our boy Doug Peterson now goes to 6-0 as a dog in the postseason after covering the game and then winning the game late last week. So the question is now going to be, did they kind of, all right, they've gone as far as they're going to go. They had that miracle comeback, and that's going to be they're always going to remember this offseason is the playoffs and that one playoff win. But we're not in Kansas City's ballpark. We'll worry about that next year. Or do they make this a competitive game, which based on the Chiefs' MO, it could possibly work out that way?
Good questions. You mentioned Doug Peterson, his excellent record as a dog in the postseason. The only thing I can say to that is 5 of those point spread covers were with Philadelphia.
Yeah.
1-0 with Jacksonville, who's been a surprise here, obviously.
So and that wasn't easy, of course, last week to get to 1-0.
No, not at all. Yeah. Not you're down 27-0.
Yeah.
No, that looked like that one loss was almost painted and sent in. But it nonetheless, to their credit, Jacksonville did not give up in the football game in a combination of, I think, some poor play calling by Brandon Staley. I had mentioned to you before we got on the air about the 3 coaches in the National Football League who bowed out last week. 3 of the coaches who bowed out last week were the analytical coaches, okay? The guys that do the game by the number crunching. And Brandon Staley being at the top of the heap. And all 3 of those coaches who lost last week, all 3 of the analytical coaches, they lost largely because their pass to run ratio was despicable, okay? It was at least 2-1, 3-1, or better in all of those games. They don't do the basics. They don't do the Bill Parcells basics in these games, these analytical coaches. Everything they have in their game plan is pass, 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 pass. And it ended up biting all 3 of those coaches. Now, obviously, Andy Reid is not that, nor is Doug Peterson that. We're not going to see that in this particular football game. We're going to see a little bit more of what they both of these teams do, good old style blue-collar football in this game.
And I've said this really for I don't know if it's been the last 2 Super Bowl, last 2 drafts, but I know I talked about it last year, and that is, look, we all know that the Chargers need run defense and all that. Okay, everybody knows that, but the one position that I've been saying it's probably been for a couple of years, the Chargers need to. Because I've been saying this since Melvin Gordon left. They need to get back to a number 1 running back and use Austin Eckler the way that they've always used him. When it used to be Gordon 1, Eckler was an awesome 1B. And they've completely gone away from that formula. And I think that's part of the reason they don't really run the football anymore. Because just imagine, now I know he got hurt, and I'm not saying that Zion Johnson is not going to turn out to be a good player for them because they needed offensive line help. But just imagine the Chargers' offensive line if they would have drafted Breece Hall.
Oh, nice.
And they would have had Breece Hall as the number 1 running back with Eckler. Just imagine how dynamic that offense would look. So they didn't do it last year, but that's something I would look into, is that now they've been criticized and everybody knows it. They got to run the ball more. Okay, but you got to go and get a running back too. So maybe look at the Chargers, find a really good running back in the draft. And because Isaiah Spiller is a wasted pick. So find a really good first round or early second or second round running back. And I think that could turn their offense around because Herbert is a really good quarterback, but he needs help. He's not elite, and if you don't give him help, it's just you're putting all this pressure on a quarterback that's just not who I think they need him to be right now.
Yeah, it's that imbalance we just talked about, Greg. You cannot be pass heavy. And just all they need to do is look up north, the Chargers up at San Francisco. What did they do? They
Yeah.
went out and got Christian McCaffrey, okay? All of a sudden, their backfield solidified, okay? Uh, Kyle Kyle Shannon's always been all about rushing, okay? Rush the football, just run the ball more times than your opponent runs the ball. You control the clock, you control your destiny. And they got a little bit away from that. They picked up Christian McCaffrey, and all of a sudden, now their rush attempts per game has zoomed up the charts again, back to the old San Francisco style of football. Then you surround all that with Deebo Samuel,
Yeah.
Kittle, okay?
And
And all
Ayuk.
of a sudden, I'm sorry?
And Ayuk.
And
Brandon Ayuk. Yeah.
exactly. So suddenly the pressure's not all on Brock Purdy here in this football game. And that's what you call a well-balanced football team. The Chargers are anything but a well-balanced football team, and it goes from the coach's philosophy right down into the locker room.
Yeah, I wonder if Staley just hung around Sean McVay too long. And,
Yep.
okay, it works for Sean McVay, so let's do that. And no, Sean McVay, yeah, it worked, but it barely worked. He should have run the football more. He still should run the football more. They should have some more balance in that Ram offense. But that's what the Chargers need. And because, I mean, have you ever seen a quarterback that tall have so many passes blocked at the line of scrimmage?
Never, never. And I thought the same thing when I saw that. What's going on here? This looks like Baker Mayfield throwing the football.
It's
Okay.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, and look, the other thing is, yeah, as good as a quarterback he is, he has no touch. I mean, he doesn't know
Not yet.
yeah, how to put the ball and to lob the ball. He had that one receiver open for a touchdown. I think it might have been on that 24-0 field goal, where if he just puts it, touch on it, he's open, but he can't do it. He just everything is that. Everything is let's throw the ball as hard as I can, and it just go. You can't when you got a defender standing right in front of you. So, yeah, and
There's no Joe
Mike
Burrow
Williams
accuracy
too.
at all. No, none at all. Right.
I mean, that's the other thing. You don't have Mike Williams in the game. You should think that you're going to run the ball a little bit more, but Jacksonville takes advantage of it, and they got a second life, and Trevor Lawrence gets a second life, and he needed that. He did not want to end his season that way. That would have been a terrible way to end the season, but he did a really good job. Once again, you've got a very good coach alongside him, Doug Peterson, and that now. Where does that put Lawrence with the Chiefs? Like I said, is it just going to be, well, we've gone as far as we're going to go, or can we actually make this a football game? So I don't know. I mean, I think this could be a football game. I think it will be. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs covered late. Maybe they score a touchdown or get a few points late to cover and run away. In kind of the way Seattle did, because if you would have saw the score of the Seattle game, San Francisco, they just blew them out. Well, no, they didn't. I mean, that was, and how about this too? And I was going to do this, I just haven't had time to do it for my channel, but there were two plays in the playoffs this week that completely changed the games, and I'm not talking about the obvious ones. This is why every year when we talk into our prediction show, we talk about the team has to have injury luck. They got to get the calls, and I don't just mean the calls where everybody, is it a touchdown or not, or is it a big turnover in the fourth quarter or not? I'm not talking about those big calls. I'm talking about the little calls too. Remember in the San Francisco Seattle game when it was still a ball game, late third quarter, as Seattle was actually trying to drive for a touchdown. And they called that offensive lineman for going down the field, and he was maybe a foot past the line of scrimmage. I don't know if you remember that one.
I remember that one, yes.
Okay. Very next play, I think it was, or a couple plays later, is when he got sacked. But the next play, I think it was the next play or two plays later, but the next play, he threw the ball to Metcalf, in the corner of the end zone. And what happened was he had to throw it a little early because of pressure. But by throwing the ball a little bit early, the defensive back for San Francisco is got his hands on DK Metcalf, and he's clearly past 5 yards down the field. And so I'm going, and that's why Metcalf couldn't catch the ball, because he had already been pushed and he couldn't get there, but the ball was thrown so early that I just think the officials, like, okay, he overthrew him, and that's it, plays over. But if you're going to nitpick a guy, an offensive lineman that is a foot past the line of scrimmage, then you should be doing the same exact thing on the next play when the guy's got his hands on him past the 5 yards that he's allowed to do that. The point is when the official goes in that direction, he goes for or against you, it can completely change the complexion of the game sometimes. That's exactly what happened. The next play, he gets sacked, fumble, and it's all San Francisco. What happens if they don't call that little gimmicky penalty? What happens if they do call the pass interference against Metcalf? Maybe Seattle scores a touchdown, and all of a sudden you've got a 4-quarter game. There's no way Seattle's falling apart if they score a touchdown on that drive. That's still going to be a 4-quarter end of the game kind of outcome, but those kind of plays just can change the complexion of a football game.
Sounds like you were in the Seattle locker room after the football game when they were breaking down what didn't work or what didn't go right, and that certainly didn't go right for Seattle. No, I agree 100%.
But that's why you have to get the breaks. You've got to get them, and then the Jacksonville Charger game, you had that, and I'm not talking about the one where Bosa gets the penalty. I'm talking not the 15-yard. I'm talking about the one where they say he lined off sides. I mean, come on.
Yep, come on.
His head was a little bit offsides. They never call that. The sack would have taken him out of range. They would have had to kick the field goal. That might have ended the game. And it changed the complexion of the game because the Jags were able to keep the drive. They score a touchdown. They keep the momentum going. And again, you've got to get the breaks on these officials. And when you and it's great when you're San Francisco and you're Jacksonville and you can take advantage of those breaks like both of those teams did.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Zebras play themselves into the outcome of the games way too many times. And when we end up talking about bad calls rather than the play of the game, the plays that were made as opposed to the plays that weren't made, and instead we're talking about the calls that were bad calls by the Zebras, it's not good for the National Football League.
Yeah, and I don't know what Bosa said to the official on the 15-yarder. I have no idea if he said something he shouldn't have, and that's why the official winds up getting into his face, which he never should do. But maybe he said something that was warranted for the official to get into his face and then throw the 15-yard penalty. I don't know, but Bosa can't allow that to happen anyway. Just don't let your emotions get the best of you, because if he didn't, Jacksonville kicks an extra point. Then if they kick a field goal, the game goes to overtime. You can win the football game. That play. Now look, Jacksonville still had to complete the 2-point conversion, so the Chargers still could have stopped them. But that you let the game get the best of you, and you let those officials get the best of you, and that's on you. That's you can't allow that to happen.
I thought the 15-yard penalty was more for Bosa taking his helmet off on the playing field, which is an automatic penalty. He was just so angry and in so much disgust before he got to the sideline. He ripped it off and threw it down on the field.
Yes,
I think that's what the penalty was all about.
Yeah, the whole thing where I was just referencing the fact that the official shouldn't really be getting in his face anyway.
No, not at all.
He shouldn't be doing that
Right.
unless, like I said, unless Bosa said something that he shouldn't have said. But still. Yeah, that throwing the hell. I mean, you would have thought years ago, and I forget it. I saw a player in college do this, and they got penalized. And it was the first time I remember that happening in years. And now all of a sudden, it's like the players have forgotten it, and they're starting to do it again. They're starting to throw their helmets again off their head on the playing field, and now they've been reminded that you can't do that. Don't forget, that's going to cost you.
Exactly.
Because I think the one play. And I remember there was a play, too, that it happened, and I think it was in college, might have been in the pros, And yeah, actually, it was in the pros. It was that game, the Atlanta Carolina game. Remember the early Atlanta Carolina game when Moore caught that bomb
Yep.
and he threw his helmet off,
Yep.
and then they called the penalty, and Atlanta winds up getting in position, I guess, to kick a game-winning field goal or a tying field goal in overtime, and then they lost in overtime or something like that. So yeah, so it's been going on again in the NFL and college football, and it's always going to cost you, unfortunately. But that's why you got to keep your cool. Look, San Francisco was clearly better than Seattle. That's not even a debate. That's why you need all the breaks in the world when you're the underdog. As far as the Chargers, didn't you think, based on their history, that when it got to a point when it was 27-0 and they once again failed to score a touchdown to put the game away, that it's like, you could almost just tell that, I don't think this game is really over. But if that was the New England Patriots up 27-0, you're not even thinking about it. You're like, I'm turning this game off. The game's over. But the Chargers have had such a bad history of coming up and having disappointing playoff performances that you just never felt comfortable because it was 27-0. But statistically, the Chargers really weren't doing a whole lot. They were just taking advantage of all the Jacksonville mistakes.
I got to be truthful. I had Jacksonville in the football game, and even though they were down 27-0, I felt I still had a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, I felt like I had a chance. It was a miracle, but I still felt like I had a realistic chance.
Yes.
As it turned out. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse to death, but Staley continued to throw the football.
Yeah.
When he can run the football, chew up the clock, and keep them off the field, he doesn't do that.
Hey, he fired his offensive coordinator for it.
Yeah.
He put the blame on someone else.
Yes, somebody's got to take the blame. Exactly. Right.
All right, and then the other two games in the NFC. So the Eagles are a 7.5-point favorite against the Giants, and the Giants now are 16-4. And you can look this up in the playbook playoff guide. They're now 16-4 against the spread as a playoff dog after covering last week. But as you noted in the playoff playbook guide this week, in similar playoff matchups as far as the teams in the postseason and the Giants and how they fared and the Eagles and how they fared against those teams, the like teams, the Eagles are a plus 571 and the Giants are a minus 421 on the stats. That's a big discrepancy. And I just think the question to me is going to be, we all know who the better team is. We all know that the Eagles can blow the Giants out if they're on top of their game. But we don't know if the Eagles are on top of their game because they haven't been on top of their game for about the past month. We don't know Jalen Hurts' health condition. This is another divisional matchup. I actually kind of like the Giants in this matchup as far as taking the points. And if I was looking for a second dog to take besides the Bengals, which are the obvious pick for me because they are my Super Bowl pick, I would actually take the Giants.
I'm with you in this football game with the Giants. We concluded our write-up in the Playbook Football Preview Guide newsletter this week, and our last line was basically backing the Giants, who are on a roll against the Philadelphia Eagle football team that's on a slide. And not only are they on a slide, they've got a quarterback that is not near 100% of what he was all season long. He fell out of the MVP race because of the injury he had. He had to miss time doing that. He's not going to be 100% in this football game. And I think this is an ideal spot for Philadelphia to take advantage of a situation like that. And especially given the fact that, number one, they're a division opponent who knows this team inside and out. They fell twice to this football team this year. Take a team out 3 times in a row is asking a lot. We know San Francisco did it against Seattle. But I think the Giants are playing much better ball right now than Seattle was going into that Frisco game. So I'm with you. I think the Giants have got a real chance in this football game here. For no other reason, it's form over function. And right now, it's the New York Giants that have the form in the football game.
I think the game might come down to what we see in the first quarter. What do we see? Do we see the Eagles and Hurts and they're like, hey, we're back. We're moving up and down the field. And we got our confidence back, or do the Giants get off to an early lead and Eagles look a little discombobulated? And if that happens, I just don't see the Eagles blowing the Giants out the next 3 quarters. I just think if the Giants can get off to an early start, the Eagles look like they're just still not in form. Not only are the Giants going to cover this game, but they're going to have a good chance to win the game outright.
Well, one of the things we put in the playbook preview guide newsletter this week is how teams have fared in one-score games this year. There was no team in the NFL that was better than the New York Giants. They were involved in 14 one-score games. Think about that. 14 one-score games this year. They only lost to the spread one time, largely because they were on the dog end of all that stuff. But if this game ends up being that one-score game, you're going to cash that ticket here as well. And Philadelphia has been also known to play down to the level of teams in one-score games. They were in 7 of them. They lost the money 6 times. So I think if New York does what they do coming into this football game and plays that Brian Daboll playbook game plan in this football game, I think the points are very attractive here, especially when you're taking more than 7 points.
And the other thing too is again, we talked about the Eagles in their form. The Giants, even though they're nowhere near as talented, they are right now at an all-time confidence season high. And confidence just goes a long way in sports. And when you've got that, whether we want to call it mojo or you're in the zone or confidence, that's the Giants kind of have that. And so we'll see. The crazy thing is, and we talked about this with the NFC, that, all right, it's the Eagles and the Niners, and they're the only really 2 really good teams that could match up with a lot of those big AFC teams. But what if one of those 2 teams lose? You're going to have a team like the Giants in the NFC Championship game, 1 win away from a Super Bowl, or maybe even the Dallas Cowboys, 1 game away from the Super Bowl. So we're getting to that point where it could actually happen. I don't think, especially when you take a look at San Francisco, and yeah, they beat up on Seattle, but that's completely different. You're playing a Cowboy team that is right now a lot more of an explosive team, both offensively and especially on defense.
You know what's ironic, Greg? If you take a look at the makeup of these teams that are in this divisional round, 2 of these teams only won 4 football games last year. One won 4, the other won 3. Last year in the NFL playoffs, at this stage of the playoffs, there was only 1 team that had won 4 games the previous year. That was the Cincinnati Bengals. And, they proved their worth. Now, can Jacksonville and or the New York Giants prove their worth? People say they shouldn't be here. They don't belong to be here. But they are. And anything can happen in a game like this. And, again, this being this double revenge dog in this football contest here. And, by the way, these double revenge same-season dogs, when they take more than 6 points, they're 6-1-1 against the spread in this particular role.
Okay.
Again, I just keep throwing these additives here on the New York Giants. Maybe I'm being blind and not looking at what Philadelphia is or was all season long, but they're not what they were all season long, and that's my point.
Yeah. Again, look, if you enjoy live betting, then I would be looking at that because I'm going to check the Eagles out, and like if I see the Eagles and the Giants and the game is like there's not a whole lot of point movement, but you could already tell. Like the Eagles are not doing anything. Or let's say they get off to even sort of like what happened last week with San Francisco and Seattle, because San Francisco gets off to the early 2-score lead, but Brock Purdy wasn't looking all that great early. No. He was throwing behind the receivers. He almost could have got picked off a couple of times. He needed that running game to get going, and then he didn't really start getting comfortable until the slide began. And then all of a sudden, the 2-score lead, and now it's an avalanche, and I can kind of feel more confident and so forth. Now, will Brock Purdy move that into his second game, and he's got all that off of him? Who knows? It's another opponent. It's a better defensive opponent. But when you talk about that specific matchup with the Cowboys and the Niners, I just think that in the beginning of the game, just like the Giant game and the Eagle game, I think live betting is going to mean a lot. If I see Brock Purdy kind of struggling again, he's throwing behind receivers, but they get off to an early lead, just like they did against Seattle, I would not be hesitant to throw some money on the Cowboys or the Giants on their money lines, because right now they're 165 Cowboys and 290 Giants. So let's say the Eagles somehow, let's say they get a kick return touchdown and they go up 7-0. And for the rest of the quarter or for a series or two, their offense looks not very good. It's looking like it's not working. But the odds have got to move. So you're now going to probably get 4-1 on the Giants because they've got now a 7-point lead. Well, in that light, I would probably feel comfortable taking the Giants. And if San Francisco gets off to an early lead this time around with Dallas and they're having a little bit more talent, if Brock Purdy doesn't look sharp early, but they've got a lead, I wouldn't hesitate to also put a little bit of money on the Dallas Cowboys money line. And I think that just goes to show you, though, that there's a lot of holes still overall in these NFC teams, no matter who they are.
Exactly. Right now, as you mentioned before, San Francisco appears to be the best team in the NFC. I don't think people would argue with that at all.
Yes.
The Dallas Cowboys were expected to be here. They look like they took a choppy road to get here, but nonetheless, they are here. And they're potentially capable. There's no question about that either. The Philadelphia Eagles were the surprise team, I think, in the National Football League this year. Right out of the gate, they didn't stop. They had that, 7-0 start to begin the football season.
Yeah, they were they, up to 14-1 or something like that?
Something like that, right.
Yeah, they were like invincible until they lost that Saint game. Well, they lost the Cowboy game and then the Saint game without Hurts.
Yep.
And then they haven't looked good since.
No, they haven't. So, as far as the Frisco game is concerned here, I'm a big Kyle Shanahan guy, as you know. I like his game plan. I think he'll outcoach Mike McCarthy in this football game. I don't think that's a given. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't know if Mike McCarthy will be able to do X's and O's wise to counter any of the moves that Shanahan's going to make in the football game. But I also know that teams in the National Football League playoffs, and I'm going to share this with the listeners out there. We did it on our ATS podcast, and it's one of the most incredible stats in the National Football League playoffs. And bear with me a second here while I find this, because it's a beauty. And basically what it is teams who are playing in the National Football League playoffs, who are at home, are off of a win and cover in their previous game, and they lost in the championship round the previous year. These football teams have been not only good, they've been exceptional. Try 19-2 straight up and 18-3 against the spread.
Where San Francisco is right now.
That's where San Francisco is in this particular football game, right? I'm not backing away from that. Not with a coach like Kyle Shanahan. I think that's, and what it tells you is those teams come with that big chip on their shoulder. We made it to that championship game last year. We came this close to get into the Super Bowl. We're not letting anybody get in our way this year. So hence, I'll be on the San Francisco 49ers in this game.
Yeah, I think it's one thing when you see the Cowboys looking like they did against teams, inferior teams, which the Buccaneers were clearly. That was it was not a surprise to see the Cowboys blow out the Bucs. Not a surprise. Whether you pick the Bucs or not, that's Brady and his history and all of that, and Prescott's history, and I can completely understand that. But the way the Bucs have played all season, not a surprise. And as far as the Cowboys, though, now it's time to step up in competition on the road. Go out west and take on a team this talented. Can they do that? That's what they really haven't been able to prove. I can see them beating the Bucs in that situation last week. I don't think I could see them doing this unless Brock Purdy is just that bad. Unless he has a couple of early interceptions that did go his way last week, and he does the same thing this week, but now they're interceptions instead of incompletions. Maybe I could see that going against the Niners. I can still see the Niners winning that game anyway. But I just, Dak Prescott, it's one thing to win a game like you did last week, but when you got to beat the best defense possibly in the NFL, that's completely different.
One thing I love doing, Greg, is going against teams or players that come off of record-setting performances or personal highs. The performance Dak Prescott had last week was his best effort in his NFL football career from a quarterback rating standpoint. by far the highest he's had. That's an automatic fade for me because the return to the norm is almost always waiting at the door of the next football game. And we're talking about Dak Prescott here, who leads the league in interceptions, who makes mistake after mistake after mistake. I believe there will be a regression here by Dak Prescott, and it's going to come against a defense like this San Francisco defense. So then you've got compounding all this, fourth straight road game in a row for the Dallas Cowboys. Teams in the National Football League don't
No.
survive that too many times, okay? Only 2 of 13 teams have won in that particular role in the past, and I don't know if Dallas is worthy of being anywhere near what those 2 teams that did it were. But I know that they're susceptible in this particular football game. So that's my other caution to the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. So look, I actually think the line is a little surprising too, that the Niners are only basically a 3-point favorite. So does that mean if Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback? I don't know. I mean, where would they be with Jimmy Garoppolo as quarterback? I mean, if he had not gotten hurt and they'd have the same record and they were cruising right now and they were still barely the 2 seed, they maybe could have been the 1 seed, I almost get the feeling that they'd be a 7-point favorite in this game.
Well, you might think so, but my answer to that is no, they wouldn't be. They'd be the same favorite they are right now.
Why is that?
Well, it's because San Francisco is winning accordingly. They're not winning because of Brock Purdy. They're winning with Brock Purdy, and he hasn't shown any signs at all of regression at all. He's done nothing but answer every call that's been made for him, and so too would Jimmy Garoppolo had he been in that role. There would have been nothing different.
So why do you think though? Why is Dallas getting the respect that they're getting then?
Because they are America's football team. The people loves to bet the Dallas Cowboys, okay? Now they're the underdog. They just saw them crush Tom Brady in Tampa Bay last week, okay? They don't even care that this is their 4th road game in a row. They don't even care that Dak Prescott's an interception waiting to happen. They're the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay.
And that's the reason that they're getting 3.5 points in this game.
Good for us. We'll take the Niners and only have to give 3.
Right.
And then you have the so really, if we look at it, as far as the dogs are, what would be your top dog? Would it be the Giants or Jacksonville?
Well, I think it's easy to deduce just given the fact that I like the home teams, all except Philadelphia. I like the Giants. The Giants is the only underdog on the card that I happen to like.
Okay.
So that would, hence, by default, it would have to be the New York Giants.
And that would also be the one then that if you were going to put on the money line, you put the
That would be
Giants
the
on the
guy.
money line.
That would be the guy in the money line, exactly.
Okay. And let's see. Yeah. So it's next. I don't know. I just wonder if next week. I get the feeling that we're just not going to see all these top teams. You know, it's almost going to be too predictable for it to be Kansas City against Cincinnati, Buffalo winner, and Philadelphia and San Francisco. I don't know. I just get the feeling something else is going to happen, and maybe it is the Giants. Maybe that's the something that's going to break up all these top teams. Because if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen in the NFC.
Well, if everything goes according to Hoyle this week and Kansas City gets Buffalo next week and Buffalo gets their chance back at Kansas City when they play in Atlanta on the neutral field because of the bonkers canceled game, it will then be Buffalo's chance of redemption here because the overtime rule was changed of that result last week. But I'll go so far as to say this, that if it is Buffalo and Kansas City next week, the winner of that game will likely win the Super Bowl. For one reason, the best quarterback out of that game that will be going to the Super Bowl, and he will be the best quarterback in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, unless Jalen Hurts gets hot again, and it's a very short period of time, we'll see. Because he was one hot quarterback earlier this year.
Yes, he was.
But all that has gone away so far. All right. So, yeah, and that's going to really be a downer, really. I mean, I don't even know how that's going to look if it's Kansas City and Buffalo in a neutral stadium situation.
I think that sucks, personally.
Yeah. I don't even so what are they gonna do about the tickets? Are they gonna try to do like the Super Bowl but in a more bigger, like we'll give like 40% to the Bills and 40% to the Chiefs season ticket holders, and then the rest opened up. I mean, I hope they do. I hope they don't. Those are the ones that deserve the opportunity to travel and watch their team play in a championship game.
Well, the rest would go to Atlanta, the city thereof, so that they can capitalize on the sale of that game. But that's where people would be able to claim those tickets if they weren't Kansas City or Buffalo season ticket holders. So the crowd would probably be split, I would imagine. So that I don't think we'll see a love affair for either of those two football teams.
No, I don't think so. All right, well, we'll see if we get to that point. And then next week when we talk, it'll be the championship games that we'll be discussing. And then there'll be a week off, and then it's on to the Super Bowl. So college basketball will be on our ledger right after the Super Bowl. So we're getting closer to talking hoops. You've got that guide you're still working on, the college basketball.
Well, that March Madness tournament guide, that's going to be anybody that subscribes to our basketball newsletter, Greg, which had a fantastic week this week. Luckily we sent out free sample copies to former subscribers. I think we've gone like 7-1 on our best bets, and they're already subscribing right now. But what they're getting when they subscribe to that basketball newsletter is they will get free copies of the March Madness tournament guide and the Sweet 16 tournament guide. Those are nice bonuses. So you can check that out online at playbooksports.com.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a year for my Rutgers basketball team. So I'm feeling awfully giddy about what's going on there. So
I'm glad you said that before the night is over tonight, because I think they're up against it tonight personally.
Well, that is true. They are playing. They're in second. Michigan State, I think, is in third.
Yes.
In the division as of now. So yeah, but they landed a 5-star recruit the other day.
Nice.
So something, the top recruit in the history of the program. So we'll talk a lot of college hoops coming up. Can't wait to do that. But first off, we've got the NFL. 3 more games to go starting next week. Mark, appreciate it as always. And again, Playbook Experts YouTube channel, so you can check that out. The ATS show is available every Wednesday. And you're also going to be talking college basketball on that channel as well, correct?
I will. We'll be doing that, especially as we get closer and closer to the Super Bowl, Greg. Yes, we will.
All right, Mark. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games. Be well. Thank you.